Hello there, guys. How are you doing? This is Fabio Merone with you. I am a research fellow at the University of Rome 3, and also I am a postdoc associate fellow to the Centre interdisciplinaire de recherche sur l'Afrique et le Moyen-Orient. This is in French, and this is from Laval University in Quebec. So I am a specialist in politics of the Middle East and North Africa, and today I'm talking about media, al-jazeera and al-mayadeen, two very important media outlets, news media outlet, satellite news media outlet, that represent in the Arab world two different ideological trends that were together at the beginning, were on the same front of the battle, so to say. Then they split, and then maybe now they are coming back united again. This is at least the hypothesis that I will do in this video. First of all, I have to say that this is an old new channel. It is new because I just started it, but it is old because this is the continuation of a channel that was closed down by YouTube for matters of censorship on my view on Palestine. If you are interested to know more about that, you will find in my channel a video explaining it. I have also to say that I'm not necessarily a specialist on media issue, and therefore I use these ideas on media just to link it to the geopolitics of the region. As we will see, there is a straight link between the editorial lines of those channels and other channels in the Arab world and the geopolitical issues, each sharing, each taking one side according to ideological and political affiliations. So let's see how I could develop this argument, this issue. And I will do by, first of all, saying a few words about Al Jazeera, the story, how it came to be. Then I will see how al-mayadeen became an opposite front to Al Jazeera. Al-mayadeen came out of Al Jazeera. There was launched by a journalist coming from the Al Jazeera group, and then the third side. And so the conclusion, we will see how we may imagine how those two blocks came together again against the backdrop of the Gaza crisis. This is the link that we should do, how the Gaza crisis was covered, how this led the two sides to stay on the same front again. So let's say two words about Al Jazeera. The Al Jazeera, very famous. You know, there is also an English version of Al Jazeera. I'm talking here about the Arabic version. And this was founded, it was established, was launched by Emir Sheikh Ahmed bin Khalifa. This is the Amir that in Qatar inaugurated the new politics in 1995. He indeed succeeded to his father, who's just seized power to his son. I mean, it was quite unusual. It was kind of a coup. Anyway, this Sheikh Ahmed was credited for having a liberal vision of politics. He was at that time a young emir around the 40s, and he still is an educated young man, British educated young man. So he brought a new spirit in the peninsula, in the Qatar peninsula, and he started a season of reform, policy of liberalization, we may call it, in different domains, social and political. He gave large space to women's education, and he made also some limited political reforms, established a council for the first time elected, and he also invested a lot on education. It's very famous, the education city in Qatar. I have been myself, where the Amir invited many international universities, Americans and British, to to establish in this education city, and he promoted high quality education. He encouraged a lot women and youth in Qatar to invest on their own education. Of course, this is something that was a process that was going on in the Gulf countries, that already since the beginning of the 90s they felt they should change their economy in a more diversified way, and not only remain dependent on the low oil and gas resources. Within this frame, the Sheikh Ahmed ibn Khalifa made something that appeared to be like a magic move with the eyes of today, and that was the launch of Al-Jazeera. It was a very successful operation, no doubt about that, nobody can doubt about that. It was 1996, just 96 years, just 1 year after he took power, and the occasion was the breaking down of the Arabic BBC, which came in trouble because of an issue with the Saudi donors. Saudi Arabia was giving money to BBC Arabic. They came into contrast because of censorship issues, something like that. All of a sudden, hundreds of journalists of high level became without a job, and Sheikh Ahmed took this chance to call them to found, to establish this new satellite news channel, which was Al Jazeera, to which was guaranteed a large level of freedom. Of course, I mean, we must say that there were some limits to this freedom. First of all, avoid to talk about the domestic Qatari policy, pay attention to some of the sensitive issues on the GCC countries because of the consequences in terms of troubles that the Qatar state could have, especially with this big neighbor Saudi Arabia. But besides that, there was a large space of freedom, at least at that time in the 90s was very unique. And Al Jazeera became famous for that because it gave this space for debate, which was unique in the Arab world. All the taboo themes were discussed with no censorship. And Al Jazeera became also very famous because it became also the chain that developed a counter-narrative, an Arab counter-narrative to the main issues, international issues of the MENA region, of this region politics. The inspiration was the CNN. The CNN became famous in 1991 when it covered the American war against the Iraqi Saddam Hussein troops, but it inaugurated this war journalism, but that was an embedded war journalism. CNN journalists were traveling around with the army and so covering the war, but not really in a way that would promote a neutral vision that was obliged to follow the army guidelines. Al Jazeera, after this experience, proposed itself as an alternative narrative, and it became very famous not only because of this counter-narrative, but also because it was very professional in following war situation. Very, very famous. It started in 1998, American bombardment of Iraq, but most famously, Al Jazeera became known for its cover of the Afghanistan campaign in 2001. It was the only media in Afghanistan, in Kabul. For this reason, it was also bombed by the Allies, by the United States. I mean, the headquarters, Al Jazeera headquarters in Kabul was bombed by the Americans at that time. They accused Al Jazeera to be a complice with Al-Qaeda, with Bin Laden, that was famously speaking through Al Jazeera. Actually, there were those records of Bin Laden that were broadcasted in Al Jazeera. So it was very contentious. Then Al Jazeera proposed again its style of news covering in the Baghdad, in the Iraq invasion of the US in 2003. Again, it was bombed by the Americans. In both cases, there were deaths. Al Jazeera journalists died under those bombardments. Anyway, Al Jazeera became the voice of the Arabs, and it was very popular. It took a huge audience with no precedence really anywhere else, the role and the importance that came to play Al Jazeera. But there is though already in 2011 Al Jazeera was very popular, there is nothing compared to what happened after 2011. The 2011 is the beginning of that season of uprisings in the region, called or known as Arab Spring or Arab uprisings, and Al Jazeera took sides for the demonstrations against the authoritarian regimes. Al Jazeera became so somehow the voice of the media of those people protesting in the Arab world, even in the West. Changed a little bit. The vision of Al Jazeera became more sympathetic. In 2006, Al Jazeera also launched an English version of his channel. But this success came to a limit when, by the end of this process of revolution, as it was called, by 2012, 2013, the Arab public sphere started to change, and Al Jazeera also image to the eyes of a part at least of the public, the Arab public, changed again. The reason was also that the Arab media offer was much more variegated than before. Al Jazeera was not the only network, the only news broadcasting, the only no-governmental news broadcast. There were also others that started to challenge the Al Jazeera monopoly, but the role of Al Jazeera became more complicated because of the changing ideological and political scenario that this Arab uprising created. So there was no more, by 2012, 2013, there was no more consensus about this cleavage between people oppressed and oppressed regime. I mean, different narratives started to be growing up in the Arab world, as those Arab Springs were also something different, that spontaneous uprisings for freedom, but became, at least from one side of the Arab public, be seen as part of a conspiracy. And this theory this split started really with the beginning of the Syrian civil war. And here we comes into we comes to turn a new page in the media Arab scenario. Other outlets developed, as we said, and there was a new camp that developed as against Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera became to be identified with the Muslim Brotherhoods that took power in the aftermath of the regime change. The Muslim Brotherhood were this biggest opposition party ever in the Arab world. So the reverse of the regimes, the fall of the regimes, gave advantage to the Muslim Brotherhoods that through elections could gain power. And on the other side, the Muslim Brotherhoods became the enemies of those that came to develop a counter-reaction to this movement. But this front, this opposite front to Al Jazeera or to the Arab uprising, was not united. And there were two big families. We can divide this opposite front into two big families. On one side, we have what we can call the anti-imperialist sides. And on the other, we have what I call the royalists. Let's call them the royalists. The anti-imperialists, they opposed the Muslim Brotherhood, Al Jazeera, and Qatar, which was behind, on the base of defending those regimes that were against the American imperialism in the region, the American hegemony in the region. On the other side, there were other regimes like Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, the EUA, the United Emirates, Arabic United Emirates, that led this counter movement of opposing the regime change. So people were more conservative and concerned to this phenomenon of regime change more for their own sakes and for the safety of their own power. So al-Mayadeen was the channel that came to represent the side of the anti-imperialists, whilst Al Arabiya and Sky News, two other famous outlets, became to represent the Saudi and the Emirate position. I mean, Al Arabiya was sponsored by Saudi Arabia, and Sky News by Dubai, by the Emirates. But we focus on al-mayadeen because this is our topic. So let's see the second point of the discussion. This is the al-mayadeen, the split, and what it became to be al-mayadeen as representing this new ideological media front. Al-Mayadeen was launched in 2012 by a journalist whose name is Ghassan Benjeddo. He's a Tunisian, but he had long moved to Beirut. He was the al-jazeera head office in Tehran and Beirut. And he was close to Syria and to Hezbollah somehow. And he came in polemic with the editorial board of Al Jazeera on the issue of Syria. There was this split. When he understood that Al Jazeera was on the side of the opposition, of the rebellion against the Assad regime, he came out, he split, and he came to found a new channel, al-mayadeen. It must be said that it's not only about Syria. There was also an event that was quite a turning point before that, and that was the Bahrain uprising. This is something that is not very known, but it really should be known, because the poor Bahraini, they suffered the fact that neither Al Jazeera or other outlets, Western or others, really covered or gave the rights or gave the deserved space to the tragedy of the Bahrain civil society that, following the Arab uprising, wanted themselves to get freed from their own regime, but it was not covered because of Saudi Arabia fear of this uprising, specifically this uprising. Not that they did not fear the others, but the one in Bahrain was sensitive enough for Saudi Arabia for two reasons: because it was just a country at the frontier with Saudi Arabia, but also because this was an uprising whose frame was given as being a Shia uprising, in the sense that the majority of the people in Bahrain are Shia, and they are subdued to a Sunni government close to Saudi Arabia, to the Americans. So this uprising was seen as the long hand of Iran that was coming right in the face of Saudi Arabia. So this reading was the beginning of all what is happening afterward in terms of the so-called Arab Cold War, Sunni and Shia. We are not going into the details of that, but it is significant that Al Jazeera did not cover enough this uprising. It was quite eloquent of the Qatar putting some limits to those sensitive issues for the balance of power with Saudi Arabia and the GCC countries. But for Ghassan Benjeddo, this was enough for going to establish a new channel. This channel was, according to Ghassan Benjeddo himself, done thanks to the money of some wealthy business that generously proposed themselves as being donors of this operation. But it is widely speculated actually that Iran, Syria, or even Hezbollah contribute financially to support this channel. Anyway, this is not a big deal, because what we are interested in is that al-Mayadeen became a different pole from Al Jazeera, that was challenging the Al Jazeera dominion, the same ideological ground somehow, though differently. We must also say that this turning point of 2012 was also justified by some other Al Jazeera ex-journalists by the appointment in the same period of Sheikh Ahmed ibn Thamer al-Thani from the Al-Thani family, the royal family in Qatar, as a new network's chairman. So according to those journalists that came to be a dissident wing within Al Jazeera, there was a change in the editorial board that led them to split. Anyway, al-Mayadeen became the voice of the so-called axis of resistance as opposed to the MB Qatar so-called conspiracy. It was really a civil war within civil war. We said that there are at least 3 fronts. It's not the only one. But in the front against Qatar and the Muslim Brotherhood, there was this anti-imperialist front that began to see the Syrian civil war as the big battle for protecting the region from a further expansion of the American imperialism, which now took the shape of the Islamist agenda. But al-Mayadeen became much more than that. This is interesting. It started to be developed a kind of a discourse, a narrative, a counter-narrative that went further, much further to that of Al Jazeera, which has been described as a neo-Tirmondist agenda, in the sense that al-Mayadeen became took side and to be interested to other matters outside the region, other third world, so called the South, the global South causes, and became very close to South America, to the point that al-Mayadeen started to show a big interest in Latin America, and he came in contact in 2012 with Cuba, participated to media conferences in La Habana until it created a collaboration with the famous Telesur channel. Telesur is this channel that was established by Chavez in Venezuela as a project that was indeed similar to the one at the origin of Al Jazeera, a project that was supposed to unite all the voices, the Latin American voices, against the American hegemony in the region. And so they created a collaboration, in the network of collaboration, which there was also RT, the Russian RT, also the CGTN, I mean the Chinese network. It was an attempt to create a counter narrative through the media. You see how a geopolitical reading we can have of this story. In 2015, al-Mayadeen launched a Spanish version of the channel. It was exactly the second year after the death of Hugo Chavez. So there was a clear reference, and also it was declared as something made to the honor of Hugo Chavez. As it has been said, it was supposed to revert the estrangement between Arabs and Latin Americans, to find a bridge into to the same global Tirmondist vision of the world. So Al Jazeera on one side and al-Mayadeen on the other, and this was also a split, a political split. It was also reflected, this opposition to the split of Hamas, the Palestinian movement, which is linked to the Muslim Brotherhood with the Syrian regime. In 2012, exactly in the same period when the split happened in Al Jazeera, Hamas left Damascus, where there was its office, an important office, because in contracts, in opposition to the Assad regime policy towards the opposition at that time. So you see how much the two links are linked together. But let's come to the third point. Hamas is the right connection between the second and the third point, because Hamas came indeed back to the Syrian regime around 2020, 2021. The two fronts came together again. There was also against the backdrop of the overcoming of the so-called Arab Cold War. Saudi Arabia and Iran tried to to create a new climate of collaboration thanks to the mediation of China. They open up the embassies in Tehran and in Riyadh, so they normalize their relationship that had been completely broken before. So at the same time, and slower, Hamas came closer back again to the axis of the resistance, to this Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, and anti-imperialist front. And this became clear and evident when the Gaza crisis exploded. In October 2023, to this day, the scenario changed completely, and al-Jazeera and al-Mayadeen found themselves on the same side of the battle again. This time, al-Jazeera came back to kind play that role that used to play before 2011 as creating consensus on the Arab public sphere on a pan-Arabic issue, which is the Palestinian issue. Al Jazeera was and played the role of the voice of Hamas in the Gaza revolt against the Israeli occupation. And this made Al Jazeera to come closer to al-Mayadeen. Al-Mayadeen had never abandoned the resistance front, but they were less friendly with the Hamas for the reason that we said, but now they were all on the same side of resistance. Hamas was the main resistant group in Gaza fighting against the Israeli occupation forces. Al-Mayadeen had been traditionally closer to the Islamic Jihad, which is close to Hezbollah and Iran. They both, al-Jihad and Hamas, fought in Gaza, but also in Western Bank, and also Al Jazeera and al-Mayadeen started to get closer. I mean, to be looking at each other in a more sympathetic way again. So it is a changing of strategy. It is difficult to say. Maybe it's not that far, but it must be said that there is now a new role of Al Jazeera, if Al Jazeera came back to this role. Let's just remind that one of the most popular image of in the Arab public sphere, to the point of view of the Arab public, was Abu Ubaida's speech. Abu Ubaida is the spokesperson of the Ezzedine al-Qassam brigades, the Hamas armed wing, and this speech were broadcast from Al Jazeera. Yes, Al Jazeera had the monopoly. I mean, had the special right of broadcasting those videos. So through Al Jazeera, the Palestinian resistance, was talking to the Palestinian, but to the Arab world. That was really a mediatic, very strong impact. But Al Jazeera became famous also for another popular image of this resistance battle struggle. There was the General Douiri, a strategic and military analyst that was broadcasting every day from Al Jazeera and talking about the evolution on the ground of the Palestinian resistance group in the fight against the occupiers, the Israeli forces. A very particular character that became popular because he was very passionate in talking about the Palestinian resistance, to the point that at a certain point the Palestinian Mujahideen on the ground, each time, once happened that one militia Hamas during an action called to Douiri to make an analysis of his action, demonstrating a direct link between what was on the ground and what was broadcasted on Al Jazeera. It was spectacular. Al Jazeera therefore came again close to a resistance front, staying behind Hamas, which has been the traditional position indeed of Al Jazeera, but now Hamas was on the front of the resistance. It was together with the front of resistance, more largely meant that al-Mayadeen had always sponsored. So this is, in conclusion, what I wanted to say about al-Mayadeen, about al-Jazeera, and how these relations developed to the present day. If you enjoyed, please put like. If you want to encourage my channel, subscribe, and I'll see you to the next video.